Before we venture into reading To Kill a Mockingbird, we're going to need a little background information. Harper Lee, the author of this novel, was born April 28, 1926, her given name being Nell Harper Lee. She was born in Monroeville, Alabama, and was the youngest of 4 children, her parents being named Amasa Coleman Lee and Frances Cunningham Finchley. Her father, a former newspaper editor and proprietor, was a lawyer who served in the Alabama state legislature. In 1944, Lee graduated from Monroe County High School in Monroeville and enrolled at the all-female Huntingdon College in Montgomery, Alabama for 1 year, and pursued a law degree at the University of Alabama from 1945 to 1949. Lee wrote for several student publications and spent a year as editor of the campus humor magazine Rammer Jammer. Though she did not complete the law degree, she studied for a summer in Oxford, England before moving to New York City in 1950, where she worked as a reservation clerk. Lee continued as a reservation clerk until 1958, when she devoted herself to writing. With the financial support of friends, a gift she remembers in Christmas to Me, she was able to quit her job and write full-time. Over a period of 3 years, interrupted by the deaths of her mother and her brother and other responsibilities, she worked on her novel. Harper Lee won the Pulitzer Prize for To Kill a Mockingbird, and this was her only novel. The success of this book was so immediate that the novel's release was described as a summer storm. Critics praised Lee for capturing the setting of a small southern town with its complex social fabric of blacks and whites of all classes. Other reviewers commented on its narrative technique, characterization, balance of humor and tragedy, use of symbolism, and careful interweaving of numerous themes such as childhood innocence and adult perceptions, justice and injustice, racial tolerance and intolerance, and cowardice and courage, whether physical courage of facing a lynch mob and shooting a rabid dog, or the courage of standing up for one's beliefs in the face of public condemnation. Lee won numerous awards for To Kill a Mockingbird in addition to the Pulitzer Prize. She won the Brotherhood Award of the National Conference of Christians and Jews in 1961, the Alabama Library Association Award in 1961, Bestsellers Paperback of the Year Award in 1962, and additional designations such as a Literary Guild selection, a Reader's Digest condensed book selection, and an alternate for the Book of the Month Club. Harper Lee was born right into the Great Depression, a time when jobs were lost and the stock market crashed and there was little money for anything. The idea of a happy, prosperous family faded away during this time. It was a terrible time of money being scarce and unemployment levels on the rise. Unemployment jumped from less than 3 million in 1929 to 4 million in 1930, 8 million in 1931, and 12.5 million in 1932. In that year, a quarter of the nation's families did not have a single employed wage earner. Even those fortunate enough to have jobs suffered drastic pay cuts and reductions in hours. To save money, families neglected medical and dental care. Many families sought to cope by planting gardens, canning food, buying used bread, and using cardboard and cotton for shoe soles. Despite a steep decline in food prices, many families did without milk or meat. Another event that affected Harper Lee's life, and later her writing, was the Scottsboro trial. The saga began on March 25, 1931, when a fight broke out between groups of young black and white passengers riding a freight train through Jackson County, Alabama. The white boys were forced from the train and wired ahead to the next stop on the line to have the black youths apprehended. When the train stopped just outside the town of Paint Rock, local police and a mob apprehended 9 African Americans ranging in age from 13 to 20. Only 4 of the boys knew each other and were traveling together. The police also questioned Victoria Price and Ruby Bates, 2 white women who were also hitching a ride on the train looking for work. In the hope of avoiding vagrancy and morality charges, the women falsely accused the 9 young black men, Olin Montgomery, Clarence Norris, Haywood Patterson, Ozzie Powell, Willie Robertson, Charlie Weems, Eugene Williams, and brothers Andy and Roy Wright, of rape. The case was tried and an all-white jury found the men guilty. The case was appealed to both the federal court and the Alabama Supreme Court, and in both, the guilty verdict was upheld. The men were given a court date, June 10th, the earliest the court could legally allow. The case could have ended there, but it was taken to the United States Supreme Court where the guilty verdict was overturned. This seemingly win was not met gently by the state of Alabama, and the Alabama Supreme Court continued to uphold their guilty ruling. Patterson was convicted of rape for a 4th time in January 1936, but this time his sentence was set at 75 years in prison. Following the verdict, another of the defendants, Ozzie Powell, was convicted of rape and sentenced to death. Norris' escape was subsequently commuted to life imprisonment by Alabama Governor Bibb Graves. Andy Wright and Charlie Weems were also convicted of rape and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Rape charges were dropped against Powell, but he was convicted of assaulting the deputy sheriff and sentenced to 20 years. Meanwhile, all charges against the other 4 defendants, Roy Wright, Olin Montgomery, Willie Robertson, and Eugene Williams, were dropped. Thus, on the basis of the same body of evidence, 4 defendants were freed and 4 convicted. In 1938, a final attempt to win the remaining prisoners' freedom failed when both the Alabama Pardon Board and Governor Graves denied pardon applications. Charlie Weems was paroled in 1943. Clarence Norris and Andy Wright were paroled a year later, but both were sent back to prison shortly thereafter for violating the terms of their probation. Ozzie Powell was paroled in 1946. Haywood Patterson escaped from prison in 1948. Norris, the last surviving Scottsboro boy, was finally pardoned in 1976.